Thanks very much. Thanks for coming, everyone. I've got the after-lunch slot. Wake up, everyone. You're all students. You probably all went out last night. I went out. Used to go out. Nowadays, I have kids, so I don't go out at all. And I work, which is something that you guys will do at some stage in your lives. I work in the field of international dignity. I work for a major dignity organisation, and we have a range of small and large dignity projects all over the world. Now, obviously, for those who are following carefully already, what I just said doesn't make sense. I work in the field of international, what's known as international development. I work for a major charity, and we have aid projects around the world. There's no such thing as international dignity. There's no such thing as a dignity, which is why I want to work for a dignity is a strange title for my talk. But I'm going to try and explain why the era of charity, of aid, of development is coming to an end. It's had a good innings, but actually we now need to move on from that kind of language. And when my sons graduate from LSE, assuming they get in, I want them to come to me and say, "Dad, I've got a job at Goldman Sachs." But failing that, I hope they come to me and say, "I want to work for a dignity." Now, the charity world, the aid sector, international development, has done a huge amount of good. I joined the sector 15 years ago with the intention of a lot of people that join, really, most people that join. I wanted to make a change in the world. There's a lot of poverty, injustice, and I thought I could make a difference. I think we have made a difference. We focused on healthcare, education. Kids are living their early years, many more. Poverty is down. And, people are living longer. Can I have the thingamy, please? Thanks. And yet, increasingly, I think there's a problem. I was having dinner a few years ago with the representative of an aid agency who said to me, "I've got a problem. The communities we're working with simply don't want to develop." And that was a challenge to me. How can people not want to develop? Development's a good thing, right? It's progress, better healthcare, better education, better water and sanitation. And yet, in a way, she was right. The people that she was working with didn't want development in the way that she was thinking about it. And I've worked all over the world, Colombia, Kenya, Philippines, Peru, many countries, and I've heard that message again and again. We don't want your development, your charity. And it's not because people don't want better healthcare or better education, better roads. But there's some things, it turns out, that are more important than material well-being. It's something we all recognise. That are more important even than physical well-being. There's a researcher at Oxford University, one of your great rivals, Indrajit Roy, who studied landless labourer communities in Bihar. It's one of the poorest parts of India. And these communities are considered untouchable by the elite classes. And they are actively resisting attempts to move them to better housing. They live in squalid conditions. They have poor water and sanitation. But they're resisting the offer of better housing. Not because they don't want it, not because they don't recognise that they need it, but because of the way it's being offered. He interviewed one of the women who said, "Change for us is when we can look our landlords in the eye as equals, as not as inferiors." And that message is one that is increasingly heard, and it's not just about community-level work. Actually, another part of my work is at the kind of the top level, the UN level, negotiations between countries. And this issue of power, of relative power, of dignity, of respect, I believe, is also one of the reasons why so much progress is not made at those levels. There's a very good book. I recommend you read it, especially if you're working in aid, as this gentleman is. It's called Time to Listen. Look it up. Some researchers went round to communities that were supposedly beneficiaries of aid, all over the world, recipients of aid, and asked, what's been your experience of this relationship? And it's surprising how similar the answers were, all over the world, no matter what the context. People said, we appreciate the arrival of outsiders in our community, in our country. We appreciate their intent to help us. But sometimes, in fact, very often, it feels like it's an arrogant relationship. It feels like we're being patronized. Sometimes it feels like an insult to our dignity. They don't show us enough respect. And I think that, as I say, the aid industry has made a lot of progress and has done a lot of good things. But where it's failed because of that. It's failed because of the failure to ensure dignity in the relationships with others. The minute that you turn up, and this is about international development, but I reckon it's probably relevant for all of you in any work that you do, abroad or at home, when you turn up to a meeting in another country, in another community, and you say, I know what you need. You don't. I have power. You do not. I have wealth. You do not. I have dignity. You do not. And my job is to help you have dignity, like me. That is precisely the moment when the relationship goes wrong. And the possibility of a successful partnership to promote development is undermined. Because the transformational aspect of the word dignity, and the reason why I'm proposing it to replace the word charity, is that dignity is not a gift. Charity can be given from the haves to the have-nots. Us and them. Developed, developing. Dignity is not in the gift of anyone. In fact, some of the poorest people I've ever met have been the most dignified. And some of the richest have lacked dignity. The concept of dignity turns development, turns aid and charity on its head. In a world in which half the world is rich and half the world is poor, you tell me which half is dignified. Is the corrupt official dignified? When a victim is violated, does that person have no dignity? Or is it the violator that loses their dignity? Wealth, power, and knowledge have little to do with dignity. So I think sometimes we ask the question, how can we give dignity to other people? And we ask that sometimes in the world of international development, of aid. That's our job, to give dignity to other people. But I increasingly think we should be asking the question the other way around. How can we restore dignity to the rich? How can we restore dignity to the men of violence? How can we restore dignity to ourselves in our society? Because, like I say, when I went into this job many years ago now, it's undoubtedly because I wanted to make a difference, I wanted to help people. But actually delving a bit deeper, I was also searching for something for myself. I wanted to dignify myself. I recognized the contradictions that there exist in an unequal world, in an unfair world, and I wanted to see how I resolved that for myself. I was looking for my own dignity. So the history of international development is actually based on post-colonialism. It builds on long history of an us and them relationship. And those of you who have studied development studies will have studied this in depth. It's a very good thing. It's progress for humanity. But the next step is even more progress. To move away from the charity mentality, to move away from the us-them mentality, to move away from the idea that some of us are developed and others are developing. Dignity says, we're all in this together. This relationship that we're building is for all of us to progress. Now, you might say that dignity is very hard to measure, and that's true. But that's why we have such brilliant qualitative researchers in the audience, as I'm sure we do. What if we reconceptualize international development, reconceptualize aid and charity to mean dignity? So that the purpose of all of our work is not better health, better education, not more roads, more buildings. They're all important. But the fundamental purpose is to respond to people's need for dignity, which is actually the thing that motivates all human beings. And while dignity is hard to measure, it is perhaps one of the things we most universally know. Even when we're children, we know when something is dignified and when something is undignified. This is a word that will bring us all together. In that sense, it's an incredibly modern word, because at the moment, in the 21st century, we are moving on from these divisions between countries, divisions between peoples that have really been an essential part of previous international relationships. We need to move to a horizontal relationship where we all respect each other. And I think that that will transform the likelihood of progress in the world of international development. So, I'm playing around with language a bit here, but I see no reason why one day, in the not too distant future, I can leave the world of charity behind me and go and work for a dignity. Thanks very much for listening.